Welcome everybody to the stream. This is Through the Tomes, and we're actually picking up where we left off. This is part 2 of a two-part series. And we're actually starting in the Divine Comedy series in Inferno on Canto 6. Here we go. With my returning senses that had failed at the piteous state of those two kindred, which had confounded me with grief, new torments and new souls in torment I see about me, wherever I may move or turn or set my gaze. I am in the third circle of eternal, hateful rain, cold and leaden, changelessness in its monotony. Heavy hailstones, filthy water, and snow pour down through the gloomy air. The ground it falls on reeks. Cerberus, fierce and monstrous beast, barks from 3 gullets like a dog over the people underneath that muck. His eyes are red, his beard a greasy black, his belly swollen. With his taloned hands he claws the spirits, flays and quarters them. The rain makes them howl like dogs. The unholy wretches often turn their bodies, making of one side and shield for the other. When Cerberus, that huge worm, noticed us, he opened up his jaws and showed his fangs. There was no part of him he held in check. But then my leader spread his hands, picked up some earth, and with full fists tossed soil into the ravenous gullets. As the dog that yelps with craving grows quiet while it chews its food, absorbed in trying to devour it, the foul heads of that demon Cerberus were stilled, who otherwise so thunders on the souls that they would as soon be deaf. We were passing over shades sprawled under heavy rain, setting our feet upon their emptiness which seems real bodies. All of them were lying on the ground, except for one who sat bolt upright when he saw us pass before him. "O you who come escorted through this hell," he said, "if you can bring me back to mind, you were made before I was undone." And I to him, "The punishment you suffer may be blotting you from my memory. It doesn't seem to me I've ever seen you. But tell me, who are you to have been put into this misery with such a penalty, that none, though harsher, is more loathsome?" And he to me, "Your city, so full of envy, that now the sack spills over, held me in its confines in the sunlit life. You and my townsmen called me Saicho. For the pernicious fault of gluttony, as you can see, I'm prostrate in this rain. And in my misery I am not alone. All those here share a single penalty for the same fault." He said no more. I answered him, "Saicho, your distress so weighs on me it bids me weep. But tell me, if you can, what shall be the fate of the citizens within the riven city? Are any in it just? And tell me why such discord has assailed it." And he to me, "After long feuding, they shall come to blood. The rustic faction, having done great harm, shall drive the others out. But it in turn must fall to them within 3 years by powers of him, who now just abides his time. These in their arrogance will long subject the other faction to their heavy yoke, despite its weeping and its shame. 2 men are just and are not heeded there. Pride, envy, and avarice are the sparks. They have set the hearts of all on fire." With that, he ended his distressing words, and I to him, "I wish you would instruct me more, granting me the gift of further speech. Farinata and Tacayo, who were so worthy, Jacopo, Restitucci, Arrigo, and Mosca, and the rest whose minds were bent on doing good. Tell me where they are and how they fare, for great desire presses me to learn, whether heaven sweetens or hell embitters them." And he, "They are among the blacker souls. Different vices weigh them toward the bottom, as you shall see if you descend that far. But when you have returned to the sweet world, I pray you bring me to men's memory. I say no more, nor answer you again." With that, his clear eyes lost their focus. He gazed at me until his head drooped down. Then he fell back among his blind companions. And my leader said, "He wakes no more until angelic trumpets sound the advent of the hostile power. Then each shall find again his miserable tomb, shall take again his flesh and form, and hear the judgment that eternally resounds." So we passed on through the foul mix in shades and rain with lagging steps, touching a little on the life to come. "Master," I asked, "after the great judgment, will these torments be greater, less, or will they stay as harsh as they are now?" And he replied, "Return to your science, which has it that, in measure of things' perfection, it feels both more of pleasure and of pain. Although these accursed people will never come to true perfection, they will be nearer than they are now." When we went along the curving road, with much more talk than I repeat, and reached the point of our descent, and there we came on Pt.2, our great foe. Canto 7. "Pape Satan, Alepe," burst out Pt.2 in his raucous voice, and the courteous, all-discerning sage, to comfort me, said, "Do not be overcome by fear. However powerful he may be, he'll not prevent our climbing down this cliff." Then he turned to that bloated face and said, "Silence, accursed wolf! Let your fury feed itself inside you. Not without sanction is this journey down the pit. It is willed on high, where Michael did avenge the proud rebellion, as sails swollen by the wind fall in a tangent when the mainmast snaps, so fell that cruel beast to the ground." Into the fourth hollow we made our way, descending the dismal slope that crams in all of evil of the universe. Ah, justice of God, who heaps up such strange punishment and pain as I saw there, and why do our sins so waste us? Just as the waves clash above Charybdis, one breaking on the other when they met, so here the souls move in their necessary dance. Here the sinners were more numerous than elsewhere, and they, with great shouts from opposite sides, were shoving burdens forward with their chests. They crashed into each other, turned and beat retreat, shoving their loads and shouting, "Why do you hoard, and why do you squander?" Thus they proceeded in their dismal rounds on both sides towards the opposite point, taunting each other with the same refrain. Once at that point, each group turned back along its semicircle to the next encounter, and I, my heart pierced almost through, said, "Master, now explain to me who these people are." Were those with tonsured heads, the ones there to our left, all clerics? All of them had such squinting minds in their first lives, he said. They kept no measure in their spending. Their voices howl in this clear enough just as they reach the twin points of the circle where opposing sins divide them. These were clerics who had no lid of hair upon their heads, and popes and cardinals in whom avarice achieves its excess. And I, "Master, in such crew as this, I ought to recognize at least a few who were befouled with these offenses." And he to me, "You muster an empty thought. The undiscerning life that made them foul now makes them hard to recognize. The two groups will collide forever. These will rise from the grave with fists tight, these with hair cropped. Ill-given and ill-keeping have stolen the fair world from them and set them to the scuffle. As for that, I predify no words for it. Now you see, my son, what brief mockery fortune makes of goods we trust her with, for which the race of men embroil themselves. All the gold that lies beneath the moon, or ever did, could never give a moment's rest to any of these wearied souls." "Master," I said, "tell me more. This fortune whom you mention, who is she that holds the world's possessions tightly in her clutches?" And he to me, "O foolish creatures, what great ignorance besets you! I'll have you feed upon my judgment of her. He whose wisdom transcends all made the heavens and gave them guides, so that all parts reflect on every part, an equal distribution of light. Just so, he ordained for worldly splendors a general minister and guide, who shifts those worthless goods from time to time, from race to race, from one blood to another beyond the intervention of human wit. One people comes to rule, another languishes in keeping with her judgment. As secret as a serpent hidden in the grass, your wisdom cannot stand against her. She foresees, she judges, she maintains her reign, as do the other heavenly powers. Her mutability admits no rest, necessity compels her to be swift, and frequent are the changes in men's state. She is reveled by the very ones who most should praise her, blaming and defaming her unjustly. But she is blessed and does not hear them. Happy with the other primal creatures, she turns her sphere, rejoicing in her bliss. Now we must descend to greater anguish, for every star that rose when I set out is sinking now. We must not linger here. We cross the circle to the other bank beside a spring that bubbles up and flows into a channel it makes for itself. The water was deeper than the deepest purple, accompanied by its murky waves. We began our strange descent. This dreary stream, once it has reached these malignant, ashen slopes, drains out into the swamp called Styx, and I, my gaze transfixed, could see people with angry faces in that bog, naked, their bodies smeared with mud. They struck each other with their hands, their heads, their chests, and feet, and tore each other with their teeth. The good master said, "Son, now you see the souls of those who anger overcame, and I would have you know for certain that plunged beneath these waters, as your eyes will tell you, are souls whose sighs with bubbles make the water's surface seethe. Fixed in the slime, they say, we are sullen in the sweet air that in the sun rejoices, filled as we were with slothful fumes. Now we are sullen in black mire. This hymn they gurgle in their gullets, for they cannot get a word out whole." Thus we made our circle around that filthy bog, keeping between the bank and swamp, fixing our gaze on those who swallow mud, and we came to the foot of a tower at last. Canto 8. To continue, let me say that long before we reached the foot of that high tower, our eyes had noted at its top 2 flaming lights displayed up there, to which another, so far off the eye, could hardly make it out, sent back a signal. And turning to that sea of wisdom, I asked, "What does this mean? And that other fire, what does it answer? And who are they that made it?" And he to me, "Over the filthy waves you may already glimpse what is to come, if the marsh fumes do not hide it from you. Never did a bowstring loose an arrow that whipped away more swiftly through the air than even as I watched, a skiff came swimming straight towards us on the water, under the guidance of a single helmsman, crying, 'Now you are caught, damned spirit!' 'Phlegus, Phlegus, this time you shout in vain,' replied my lord. 'You'll not have us longer than it takes to cross this bog.' Like one who learns of his deceitful plot that has been hatched against him and begins to fret, such was Phlegus in his stifled wrath. My leader stepped into the boat and had me follow after. And only then did it seem laden. As soon as he and I were in the bark, the ancient prow moves off, cutting deeper through the water than when it carried souls. While we crossed the stagnant swamp, one cloaked in mud rose up to us to say, 'Who are you that you come before your time?' And I to him, 'If I come, I do not stay. But you, who are you, now become so foul?' He answered, 'As you can see, I am one who weeps.' And I to him, 'In weeping and in misery, accursed spirit, may you stay. I know you, for all your filth.' When he stretched both his hands towards the boat, the wary master thrust him off, saying, 'Away there with the other dogs.' Then my master put his arms around my neck, kissed my face, and said, 'Indignant soul, blessed is she that bore you in her womb. In the world this man was full of arrogance, Not one good deed adorns his memory. That is why his shade is so enraged. How many now above you who think themselves great kings will lie here in the mud like swine, leaving behind nothing but ill repute? And I, Master, I would be most eager to see him pushed deep down in the soup before we leave the lake. And he to me, before the shore comes into view, you'll have your satisfaction. Your wish deserves to be fulfilled. Soon I watched him get so torn to pieces by the muddy crew, I still give praise and thanks to God for it. All cried, "Get Filippo Argenti," and that spiteful Florentine spirit gnawed at him with his own teeth. Of him I say no more. Then we moved on, with such a sound of mourning struck my ears. I opened my eyes wide to look ahead. The good master said, "Now, my son, we approach the city known as Dis, with its vast armies and its burdened citizens." And I, "Master, I can clearly see its mosques within the ramparts glowing red as if they'd just been taken from the fire." And he to me, "The eternal fire that burns inside them here in nether hell makes them show red, as you can see." At last we reached the moats, dug deep around the dismal city. Its walls seemed made of iron. Not until we made a wide approach did we come to a place where the boatman bellowed, "Out with you here, this is the entrance." At the threshold I saw more than 1,000 angels fallen from heaven. Angrily they shouted, "Who is this? Who is not dead, yet passes through the kingdom of the dead?" At this my prudent master made a sign that he would speak with them apart. Then they reined in their great disdain enough to say, "You come alone, let him be gone, who has so boldly made his way into this kingdom. Let him retrace his reckless path alone, let him see if he can, for you shall stay. You, who have led him through this gloomy realm." Reader, how could I not lose heart at those accursed words? I thought I would never make it back. Oh, my dear leader, who 7 times and more have braced my confidence and rescued me from the grave dangers that assailed me, do not leave me, I cried, helpless now. If going farther is denied us, let us at once retrace our steps. But the mentor who had brought me there replied, "Have no fear, none can prevent our passage. So great a power granted it to us. Wait for me here, comfort your weary spirit, and feed it with good hope. I will not forsake you in this netherworld." He goes away and leaves me there, my gentle father, and I remain in doubt, yes and no, at war within my mind. I could not hear what he proposed, but it was not long he stayed with them before they pushed and scrambled back inside. Then our adversaries slammed shut the gates. Against my master, who left outside, came back to me with halting steps. He had his eyes upon the ground, his brows shorn of all confidence. Sighing, he muttered, "Who dares deny me access to the realm of pain?" To me he said, "Be not dismayed at my vexation. In this contest I'll prevail, whatever they contrive to keep us out. This insolence of theirs is nothing new. They showed it once before at another gate. It still stands open without lock or bolt. Over it you saw the deadly writing. Even now, making his unescorted way down through the circles one descends, by whom the city shall be opened." Canto 9. The pallor cowardice painted on my face when I saw my leader turning back made him hasten to compose his features. He stopped, like a man intent on listening, for the eye could not probe far through that dim air and murky fog. "Yet we must win this fight," he began, "or else. Such help was promised us. How long it seems to me till someone comes." I clearly saw that he had covered up his first words with the others that came after, words no different in meaning. Still, I was filled with fear by what he said. Perhaps I understood his broken phrase to hold worse meaning than it did. Does ever anyone from the first circle, where the only penalty is hope cut off, descend so deep into this dismal pit? I put this question, and he answered, It seldom happens that a soul from limbo undertakes the journey I am on. It is true I came here once before, conjured by pitless Erechthel, who could call shades back into their bodies. I had not long been naked of my flesh when she compelled me to go inside this wall to fetch a spirit from the circle of Judas. That is the lowest place, the darkest, and farthest from the heaven that encircles all. Well do I know the way, so have no fear. This swamp, which belches forth such noxious stints, hymns in the woeful city circling it. Now we cannot enter without wrath. And he said more, but I do not remember, for my eyes and thoughts were drawn to the high tower's blazing peak, where all at once erect had risen 3 hellish, blood-stained furies. They had the limbs and shapes of women, their waists encircled by green hydras, thin serpents and horned snakes entwined, in place of hair, their savage brows. And he who knew full well the handmaids of the Queen of Endless Lamentation said to me, "See the fierce furies! That is Megaera on the left, and on the right Alecto wails. In the middle is Tisiphone," and with that he fell silent. Each rent her breast with her own nails, and with the palms they struck themselves, shrieking. In fear I pressed close to the poet. "Let Medusa come and we'll turn him into stone," they cried, looking down. "To our cost we failed to avenge the assault of Theseus. Turn your back and keep your eyes shut, for if the Gorgon's head appears, and should you see it, all chance of your return above is lost." While my master spoke, he turned me around, and placing no trust in my own hands, covered my face with his hands also. O you who have sound intellects, consider the teaching that is hidden beyond the veil of these strange verses. And now there came, over the turbid waves, a dreadful crashing sound that set both shores trembling. It sounded like a mighty wind made violent by waves of heat that strikes the forest in unchecked force, shatters the branches, hurls them away, and magnificent in its roiling cloud of dust drives on, putting beast and shepherd to flight. He freed my eyes and said, "Now look, across the scum of that primeval swamp is where the vapor is most dense and harsh. As frogs before their enemy the snake all scatter through the water, till each sits huddled on the bank. I saw more than 1,000 lost souls flee before one who was so lightly passed across the Styx. He did not touch the water with his feet." He cleared the thick air from his face, his left hand moving it away, as if that murky air alone had wearied him. It was clear that he was sent from heaven, and I turned to the master, who signaled me to keep silent and bow down before him. Ah, how full of high disdain he seemed to me! He came up to the gate, and with a wand he opened it, and there was no resistance. "O outcast of heaven, race despised," he began on the terrible threshold, "whence comes this insolence you harbor in your souls? Why do you kick against that which never can be severed from its purpose, and has so many times increased your pain? What profits it to fight against the fates? Remember your own Cerberus still bears the wounds of that around his chin and neck." Then he turned back along the wretched way. Without a word for us, he seemed pressed, spurred on by greater cares than those of the man who stands before him, who turns our steps towards the city. We, emboldened by his holy words, we entered without further struggle, and I, in my desire to see what such a guarded fortress holds, as soon as I entered eagerly, surveying the wide plain stretching on all sides, so filled with bitter torment and despair. Just as at Arlos, where the Rhone goes shallow, just as at Pola, near Guarnero's Gulf, which helms in Italy and bays her borders, the sepulchres make the land uneven, so all around me, in this landscape, the many tombs held even greater sorrow. For here the graves were strewn with flames that made them glow with heat, hotter than iron is before it's worked. All their covers were propped open, and from them issued such dire lamentation it was clear it came from wretches in despair and pain. And I. "Master, who are these souls entombed within these chests, and who make known their plight with sighs of sorrow?" And he, Here, with all their followers, are the architects, every sect. The tombs are far more laden than you think. Like is buried here with like. Through their graves burn with unlike heat. Then once he had turned to his right, we passed between the torments and the lofty ramparts. Canto 10. Now my master takes a hidden path between the city's ramparts and the torments, and I come close behind him. O lofty virtue, I begin, who lead me as you will around these impious circles, speak to me and satisfy my wishes. The souls that lie within the sepulchres, may they be seen? For all the lids are raised, and there is no one standing guard. And he to me. All will be shut and sealed when the souls return from Jehoshaphat, with the bodies they have left above. Here, Epicurus and all his followers, who hold the soul, die within the body, have their burial place. But soon your need to have an answer will be satisfied right here, as will the wish you hide from me. And I. Good leader, from you I do not keep my heart concealed except to speak few words, as you from time to time advised. O Two-Skin passing through the city of fire, alive and with such courteous of speech, if it would please you, stay your steps a while. Your way of speaking makes it clear that you are native to that noble city, to which I was perhaps too cruel. This voice came suddenly from one sarcophagus, so that, startled, I drew closer to my leader. And he to me. Turn back! What are you doing? Look there, Farinata stands erect. You can see all of him from the waist up. Already I had fixed my gaze on his, and he was rising, lifting chest and brow, as though he held all hell in utter scorn, at which my leader, choose your words with care, and his hands ready, encouraging, thrusting me towards him among the tombs. When I stood at the foot of his tomb, he looked at me a moment, then he asked almost in disdain, Who were your ancestors? And I, eager, held nothing back, but told him who they were, at which he barely raised his eyebrows, and said, They were most bitter enemies to me, my forebears and my party. Not once, but twice I had to drive them out. If they were banished, I responded, they returned, from every quarter both the first time and the second, a skill that yours have failed to learn as well. Then beside him, in the open tomb, up came a shade, visible to the chin. I think he had raised himself upon his knees. He looked around me as though he wished to see if someone else were with me, and when his hesitant hopes were crushed, weeping, he said, If you pass through this dark prison by virtue of your lofty genius, where is my son, and why is he not with you? And I to him, I come not on my own. He who stands there waiting leads me through, perhaps to one your Guido held in scorn. His words and the manner of his punishment already had revealed his name to me, and thus was my reply to the point. Suddenly erect, he cried, What? Did you say he held? Lives he not still? Does not the sweet light fall upon his eyes? When he perceived that I made some delay, before I answered, he fell backward, and showed himself no more. But the other, that great soul at whose wish I had stopped, did not change countenance, nor bend his neck, nor move his chest. And he, continuing from where he'd paused, That they have badly learned the skill torments me more than does the sped, but the face of the lady reigning here will be rekindled not 50 times before you two shall know how difficult a skill that is to learn. And so, may you return to the sweet world. Tell me, why are your people and every edict so pitiless against my kin? Then I to him, The havoc and great slaughter that dyed the Arbia red caused them to raise such prayers in our temple. He sighed and shook his head, then spoke. I was not alone, nor surely without cause would I have acted with the rest. But it was I alone, when all agreed to make an end of Florence, I alone who dared speak out in her defense. So may your seed sometime find peace. Pray and tie me for me this knot. I begged him, which has entangled and confused my judgment. From what I hear, it seems you see beforehand that which time will bring, but cannot know what happens in the present. We see, like those with faulty vision, things at a distance, he replied. That much, for us, the mighty ruler's light still shines. When things draw near or happen now, our minds are useless, without the words of others. We can know nothing of your human state, thus it follows that all our knowledge will perish at the very moment that the portals of our future close. Then, remorseful for my fault, I said, will you tell him who fell back down? His son is still among the living, and let him know if I was slow to answer, it was because I was preoccupied with doubts you have resolved for me. And now my master summoned me, so that I begged the spirit to reveal at once who else was down there with him. His answer was, more than 1,000 lie here with me, both the second Frederick and the cardinal, of the rest I do not speak. With that he dropped from sight. I turned my steps to the venerable poet, mulling, to those words that seemed to augur ill. He started out and then, as we were going, asked, why are you so bewildered? And I answered fully what he asked. Keep in mind what you have heard against you, but also now give heed to this, the sage insisted, and he raised one finger. When you shall stand before the radiance of her whose fair eyes see and understand, from her you'll learn the journey of your life. Then he turned his footsteps to the left, leaving the wall. We headed towards the center, along a path that leads into a pit. Its stench offended even at that height. Okay. We're going to go ahead and stop right there for right now. Next time we'll be reading from Canto 11 of the Divine Comedy, specifically Dante's Inferno. For updates on whenever the stream's active, make sure to follow. You can also find me on YouTube at the channel Through the Tomes, where I do Let's Plays with Facecam. Currently I'm playing Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2. I'm almost done with it. And I also read narrations much like this one for YouTube. Currently we're reading from the Brothers Grimm. And alright, I'll see you guys next time.